Hey man, you ready for dinner? Oh, yeah, almost. Just a couple more sets to do. Dude, did you even start your workout? What have you been doing? Oh, yeah. You put on that show to watch while lifting and got so engrossed you never even put weights on the bar. Yeah. Again. Yeah. I do not understand how that cartoon makes you lose your mind. You've seen it like 10 times. 12. Dude, seriously, it's a kid's show. Avatar isn't just a show for children, okay? It's so much more than that. Look, just give it a chance. Watch a few episodes with me, and if you hate it, I'll never bring it up again. Okay? Okay, fine. Whatever. Oh my gosh. Right?
Why Avatar? It's a perfectly legitimate question. Why has this animated series from the early 2000s stayed with us for so long, refusing to let go of the hearts and minds of its audience despite the passage of 2 full decades? How is it that a show written to be digestible by 7-year-old kids is widely viewed as one of the most profound and meaningful stories in modern times? What was it that changed the mind of that reluctant roommate in the opening skit? Why is Avatar: The Last Airbender so special? A large part of the reason is because it doesn't try to be. Now, ATLA is an exceptionally creative work of art, don't get me wrong, but it didn't get there by trying to subvert expectations, undermine stereotypes, or buck traditional storytelling norms. Its plot, setting, characters, and themes are all executed superbly because the show's creators focused on fundamentals. This is best highlighted by the show's overall plot. Aang's journey is the hero's journey, the monomyth. He is one of the 1,000 faces of that hero. We all know how this goes. The world is in grave danger and in need of a protector. The boy who was supposed to save the world would rather go penguin sledding, but eventually accepts his destiny, grows in strength, skill, and wisdom, perseveres through setbacks, emerges triumphant over the big bad guy, and returns home a changed, good, and noble man. That is, from the very beginning, the promise that Avatar makes its audience. We will take this goofy little bald kid and change him into a warrior, a hero, a savior. How will we do that? By having him learn to wield all 4 elements. Well, the 3 he doesn't already know at the beginning, anyway. This creates smaller promises for the audience. We will get to see Aang master water, then earth, then fire. Establishing promises, showing progress toward those goals, and then having satisfying payoffs when they are reached is fundamental to good storytelling. If the audience has a general idea where the story is going, they will be invested, assuming, of course, that you have made an interesting promise. Aang becoming a low-level instructor at the Western Air Temple would not be an intriguing premise or promise, but mastering elemental martial arts in order to defeat the most powerful man in the world, yeah, you've got my attention. ATLA, as I mentioned, then breaks down this larger promise into 3 smaller ones. By the end of each book, Aang has mastered, or at least is highly proficient in, that style of bending. Thus, we reach a satisfying payoff. As an example, in the second book, Aang starts out totally incapable of earthbending, but the audience knows he must learn it somehow. Promise. Unlike with water, Aang lacks a natural knack for this element, and so finding a teacher is of utmost importance. But even when he does recruit Toph into the Boomerang Gang, he finds earthbending and Toph's teaching methods to be more than he bargained for. But like Zuko in his attempts to redirect lightning, Aang perseveres. Progress. By the end of the book, he is wiping the floor with Earth Kingdom Palace guards, or rather, he is wiping them with the floor. Payoff. This is pretty basic stuff, right? Yes. Yes, it is. But the reason I emphasize the importance of the fundamentals of storytelling is because, well, a lot of modern Hollywood and its ilk seem to have forgotten them entirely. Take, for example, Netflix's adaptation of this very show. As of this video's release, Season 1 has premiered, following the same storyline as Book 1 of the animated series, except Aang never learns to waterbend, like, at all. Waterbending is entirely Netflix Katara's domain. And I mean, yeah, no one ever explicitly states, by the time we leave the North Pole, Aang will have learned to be a great waterbender. But that promise is implicit in the very nature of this story. Then again, considering how much unnecessary exposition riddles the Netflix adaptation, I should not be surprised if they don't understand what implicit promises are. But I'm not here to bash the live-action show. I just thought it an apt comparison to demonstrate how the original perfectly executes this basic concept of promise, progress, and payoff. However, Aang's development in the bending arts is not the whole sum of this story's plot. Since the not magic wielded by the Benders is a martial art, there must be someone against whom Aang will wield his newfound abilities. The Fire Nation, this story's villains, or in simpler terms, its bad guys. Avatar's plot, once again, is remarkably simple. It is a story about good versus evil. Evil seeks to dominate, to rule, to impose its will across every nation and on every person, to consume. The Fire Nation could very well be the Empire, or Sauron's armies, or the freaking Mongol hordes. Now, of course, there are distinct differences between our flame-wielding antagonists and those various groups, but the fundamental concept is the same. The powers that be within this evil organization believe they have the right to assert their will across all of existence. Azula, for instance, claims the divine right to rule as something owed to her from birth. It's honestly pretty heavy stuff for a show rated TV 7. Now, a lot of the darker thematic elements might go over a kid's head, but it'd be awfully hard for little Johnny to miss Monk Gyatso's skeleton in the 3rd episode. The thing is, though, without this serious subject matter, the show simply wouldn't have the staying power that it has demonstrated. There are tons of kiddie shows out there which are safe, tame, and written for the single purpose of being appropriate for young children. And I have a bone to pick with such stories, as I consider them largely inappropriate for my kids because they are dumbed down so very badly. While I obviously don't want to traumatize my kids by showing them content too mature for their ages, I do want to challenge them, and more importantly, to show them quality stories that I can watch without my eyes rolling into the back of my skull. And sometimes, as in the case of ATLA, that means narratives that deal with darker concepts such as war and death. Since it is so likely that they will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. Otherwise, you are making their destiny not brighter, but darker. That is Avatar to a T. And as its plot is a classic one, it is therefore not especially unique or original. So why does this story still resonate with us all these years later? Well, I should note at this point that the plot of Avatar is not the key element of the answer to such a question, but we'll get to that later. However, the very fact that this plot is so archetypal is what helps cement it in our memories and thus in our hearts. We can't possibly forget it. The fact that we've seen its outline dozens of times in other works of art means that it is already ingrained in our brains. The danger with telling such a tale, of course, is that it might become rote and repetitive, ultimately blending with those aforementioned dozens of stories, failing to properly distinguish itself. So how does ATLA stand out? For starters, with its setting. Avatar's world is at first glance intimately familiar. It imitates the construction of our own Earth. The poles are freezing cold, there is a variety of terrain, including oceans dotted with islands, and the peoples of those various locales have adapted accordingly. Sure, there are also 1,000 different types of fantastic creatures, but most of those are just mashups of animals we can see in a zoo, or giant versions of their earthly selves. I cannot emphasize enough how crucial ATLA's introduction of its world is. The show does not drop the viewer directly into the face stealer's den. It eases him in, first showing him waterbending, which is simple enough to understand, and then dropping a bison on him, but one that has 6 legs and can fly. That latter fact is one that Sokka, a character in this very show, does not believe. And Sokka's ignorant and arrogant disbelief is a brilliant bit of trickery. It gets us, the audience, on the side of the fantastic, urging us to accept that, of course, a 6-legged 10-ton monster can sail through the air with the greatest of ease. The magic that enables Appa's flight is, of course, the crucial element of Avatar's setting that captures the viewer's imagination and attention, that endures long after we have watched the final credits roll. And yes, I know, it's not magic, it's airbending, but I'm going to refer to all bending as a magic system because that's effectively what it is. Now, bending is contrasted against other forms of alleged magic, such as fortune-telling, so there is a distinction to be made, but that's not really relevant here. Why is bending such a fascinating form of magic? Again, because it blends familiarity, simplicity, and creativity. We all know what water, earth, fire, and air are, and all benders do is manipulate, sculpt, and move those elements to their advantage, whether that's throwing rocks at an opponent, creating air currents to enable flight, bending water to propel a vehicle, or, most importantly, heating up lukewarm tea. It's all remarkably simple and natural. With every new bending innovation which we see throughout the show, the audience thinks, oh yeah, of course you can do that. Despite its simplicity, or perhaps because of it, Avatar's magic system is incredibly creative. Starting from these 4 basic points, the creators simply asked, what else can benders do? Over and over again. They laid strict boundaries around what was possible by constraining themselves to these elements, and were then free to explore the vast possibilities within those bounds. And yes, I know that Aang kind of breaks down the fence at the end, but that's a topic for another video. To properly capture and maintain audience interest, a magic system should evolve in a sensible manner. One of the biggest dangers of a soft magic system, as opposed to the pretty hard magic system in Avatar, is that the writer can be tempted to invent a new power on the spot to resolve a problem. Like I said, different video. But for the vast majority of Avatar's runtime, every new discovery is simply another step into elemental magic, the result of years of research, innovation, or practice by a given bender. Toph's ability to see via earthbending is a perfect example of this. Before the second season, I doubt any given viewer would have thought up such an ability, but it makes complete sense to us immediately upon its appearance. Of course that's possible. Necessity is the mother of invention, after all. What is more important about Toph's blind sight, however, is that it is limited. Objects in the air are completely invisible to her. Limitations in a magic system, especially one as central to the plot as Avatar's, are crucial. There are some limitations inherent in elemental bending, obviously, as all benders, save one, can only wield one element, and certain conditions will severely nerf or even disable certain benders. Or so the theory goes. Not all limitations need be permanent. Metal bending is a perfect example of conquering such a restraint via satisfying evolution. Naturally, it is Toph, of all people, who is able to feel and sense the earthen elements within her metal prison. And you have to appreciate how metal is treated. It's not just another rock, it still acts like metal, being torn, ripped, and bent rather than broken off in solid chunks. When you have established the rules for your magic system, which Avatar does, flawlessly and naturally, and then continue to write within those self-imposed boundaries, but also explore every corner of what is possible, your innovations will be met with reactions like, dude, that's so awesome, instead of, oh, I guess they can do that now? That is, the viewer will appreciate an innovation that they probably had not thought of, but could have, rather than an invention that does not reasonably derive from the established rules, and feels more like the writer is cheating in order to move the plot forward or resolve a conflict. Okay, great. Avatar has a magic system that develops in a satisfying way and is enjoyable to watch in action, as well as a familiar yet fantastic setting. So what? Any fantasy story could boast the same. What is it that really sets ATLA apart? If you hadn't already guessed, that would be the characters. You can grab your audience's attention through intriguing world building, cool magic, or a fascinating plot, but if your characters are bland and uninteresting, your story will fail. The creators of ATLA clearly knew this. It is obvious to anyone who has, shall we say, obsessively watched the show that the cast of characters received by far the most attention of any element of the story. I have already made in-depth analyses of almost every major character in Avatar, so I won't bother going in-depth on any one of them here, but what I will do is examine how the writers endeared these characters to the audience. That starts, of course, with an introduction. A character's first moments are of paramount importance. Who is this person? What is he all about? What are her basic traits and characteristics? You'd be hard-pressed to find a story that executes this better than Avatar. Right from the first minutes of the first episode, we understand that Sokka is skeptical and sarcastic, that Katara is earnest and persistent, that Aang is carefree and fun-loving even if he doesn't say a single word about banana cake or airball. I'm sorry, I had to. Similarly, we witness Zuko's fierce intensity and single-mindedness, alongside Iroh's contrasting combination of seriousness and apparent frivolity. These are character traits that will remain consistent from the onset of the story until its very end. Yes, despite the incredible growth that all these characters, except Iroh, who is already perfect, will undergo, the foundation of who they are remains unchanged. The audience needs to be able to look at Avatar Aang in the finale and still see that kid grinning from ear to ear going Mach 2 atop an otter penguin. And yet the transformation did occur. It had to. That was the promise made at the very beginning of the story. This bald, tattooed 12-year-old will somehow save the world. He won't be able to do so merely through improving his bending skills. Aang will also need to become a man, a leader, an icon. In the same vein, Sokka cannot just improve his swordsmanship, nor Katara simply perfect her waterbending. They must mature, growing in humility, mercy, compassion, and perseverance along the way. And Zuko, well, his arc is second to none, but again, I'm not going into details here. Suffice it to say, his transformation from the angry, arrogant, and rash young prince who would sooner die than lose his chance at recapturing his elusive and ill-defined honor to the controlled, patient, and confident prodigal son who saved his nation from falling into utter ruin is one of the best, arguably the best, character arcs in fiction. By the end of our adventure, Zuko has changed dramatically, and yet he is still the same. His passion isn't gone. It's just been tempered and ordered properly. His loyalty has not diminished, but he's now loyal to what matters. He's still consummately brave, but no longer rash, having moderated his courage with wisdom. The way in which these transformations speak to both kids and adults is utterly brilliant. Core personality traits are, as any psychology freshman can tell you, generally accepted to be established by the age of 7. If you were a stubborn kid then, guess what? You're probably a stubborn adult now. I should know. I also married a rather persistent woman, so our kids are... yeah. Anyway, I think we can all agree that it is important for kids to see themselves in stories. And I mean actually see themselves, to identify with the character on a level far more than skin deep. They should be able to relate to Aang's cheerfulness, Katara's hopefulness, and Sokka's desire to protect and defend. And when they're a bit older, they will likely see their own flaws in these characters. The growth that the gang, to a man, experiences shows young viewers that they do not need to completely change who they are in order to become good men and women. They just need to become better versions of themselves. Your persistence, eagerness, and love of fun are not wrong, Avatar tells its young viewers, but they do need to be properly molded. Granted, you'd have to be a pretty perceptive and insightful youngster to consciously acknowledge such a lesson from any story, and that's okay. Children absolutely should experience stories that are a bit beyond them. You never know what they will absorb without fully realizing it. They should be able to return to that story a year or a decade later and find the experience even more enriching, as they are now able to delve deeper into the character arcs and understand the displayed growth, or in Azula's case, decay, on a more profound level. I have spent many hours watching Avatar, analyzing its characters and making the aforementioned videos about them, and every single time I find something new. A layer to the character I had yet to unravel, a line that showed how a particular trait had evolved, a few forgotten words that teased out a particular point in a character's philosophy. This is the experience adults can have when they watch ATLA with intentionality. While kids watch The Beach and understand that Azula is consummately competitive because she wants to rule, adults will perceive how her constant need to conquer has isolated her, how she lives in a solitary confinement of her own making. Children will watch Sokka's master and comprehend Sokka's struggle to fit in and sympathize with his desire to excel at something, while their parents will connect with his desperate need to be worth something and his frantic fear that he is not enough for those whom he loves. In short, kids can and do appreciate and love the characters, but it is not until they are older that they are finally able to extract our final element of what makes Avatar so great: its themes. I have saved theme for last, not because it is the most important, but because it is the final part of a story to emerge during the creative process. The intersection of plot, setting, and character is what creates the story's themes. If you start with a particular moral or message that you want to impart upon your audience, you are naturally going to write the characters and the world to fit that theme, which will inevitably lead to shoehorning, contrivances, and a generally dissatisfying narrative. I'll be talking about this idea in depth in a future video, but basically you want to avoid being God's Not Dead or She-Hulk. Totally opposite ends of the political/social spectrum, same storytelling problem. Anyway, ATLA does not fall into this trap. Each and every one of its themes is derived from the story, from the character arcs, from how the people in this world interact with it and with each other. For example, one of the minor themes in Avatar is the power of love over that of fear. This is a motif that could easily end up being cheesy and causing eye rolls that would register on the Richter scale. But how does Avatar display this theme? Not through some dramatic speech by the main character telling the big bad guy how love will triumph over all, but rather through Azula realizing that her entire philosophy of power has failed her. And yes, May does explicitly state the theme's core tenet, but that's it. The show doesn't feel the need to expound any further. It trusts the audience to understand, to observe Azula's resulting mental decline as proof that May is not alone in that choice. It has established its characters and their relationships, enabling them to make the point rather than the hand of the author coming in and slapping us across the face with the message. And while the theme of love versus fear is contained to a single section of one character's arc, it is still notable because it speaks to a fundamental truth of human existence. This is what all good stories do. If the other three elements are properly constructed, they cannot help but touch on timeless truths. It's hard to say what exactly is the central motif of ATLA, but if there is one, I would argue that hope has a shot at the crown. This should surprise absolutely no one. In monomyth, into which Avatar fits perfectly as we established earlier, hope is an essential and enduring theme. The belief that the good fight is worth fighting, that we must persist, no matter how dark the night or impossible the odds, is universal to stories about good triumphing over evil. After all, if the evil our hero faces is only as powerful as he is, what need does he have for hope? All he would need to do is trust in his own skill. Which is fine if this were John Wick, but it's not. Avatar is also not just a story about a boy learning to fight better so he can defeat the bully who beat him up at the beginning of the movie. It is a transcendental tale, one that understands that there is far more to our world than we can perceive with our five senses, that the metaphysical is just as real and just as important as the physical, that the internal and imperceptible growth of its characters will have far more of an impact on the audience than will their improved ability to knock over enemies with flying rocks. But returning to the theme of hope, I do believe it to be the major and most pervasive theme in Avatar. Aang has to hope that he will somehow find the strength to defeat the most powerful man in the world with just a few short months of training. Katara, of course, is the very embodiment of hope, or at least its loudest proponent. But all the other characters carry this theme as well. They trust that their actions are worthwhile, that their fight is not in vain, that it's better to try 1,000 times rather than give up because you're afraid you might fail, that there is some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. Like I said, hope and monomyth go hand in hand. Why does this speak to us so profoundly? Because life is a struggle. No matter how rich you are, or how strong your support network, I guarantee I know one thing about you. You have known hardship of one kind or another. And I know this. Hope is our last resort. If we lose it, truly lose it, we have nothing left. Despair is the ultimate failure. But if you just keep moving, you will come to a better place. If you got nothing else out of Avatar other than that message, I dare say this show would be worth your time. There are, of course, countless other themes running throughout this story. The unrivaled power of friendship, the necessity of forgiveness, the ever-present possibility of redemption, and the importance of holding fast to your beliefs, all told with equal excellence through the arcs and eyes of ATLA's cast of characters. But if pressed to pick a theme more unique to Avatar, I would have to say the necessity of finding balance in life. Aang's early arc is a balancing act as he juggles his duty and his desire to blow off steam in whatever silly way strikes his fancy that day. As he matures, that struggle to find balance gives way to a new one, as the Avatar weighs his moral conviction and the necessity of what he must do. Zuko's whole arc is about balancing out his impulsiveness, his brashness, and his relentless penchant for action with patience, humility, and self-control. Toph has to learn how to balance her desire for independence and her deep-seated need to belong. And Iroh, of course, shows us how to achieve balance across every area of life, having already reached the golden mean of just about every virtue imaginable. And ultimately, this balance is the reason why Avatar: The Last Airbender has stayed with us for the last 20 years. Its creators did not lean too heavily into the depth of their world building, nor the complexity of their plot, nor even the intimate psychology of each and every character. As well constructed as all of those elements are, none of them were sacrificed so that the others might shine. They are all a part of a cohesive balanced whole. So, why Avatar? Because it is a story crafted with an unfathomable amount of care, attention, and love. It is familiar yet creative, simple yet delightfully innovative, quickly understood but worthy of thorough examination. Because it plays with our emotions but simultaneously understands its power to move our hearts. Because it shows us timeless truths about hope and despair, redemption and ruin, love and fear, good and evil, and our ability to change the world. Because, quite simply, it is one of the greatest shows of all time. If you'd like to have a place to hang out with fellow ATLA stans, you can access my Discord through any paid Patreon tier. For as little as $5 a month, you get a weekly unscripted video from me, early access to these videos, and a place in our growing community. There are lots of other goodies at higher tiers, of course, from book lore drops to the ability to sponsor your own video idea on the Master Samwise channel. Special thanks to members of the Champion tier, Tom Tennyson 1337. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. God bless, and I will see you next time.